On occasion, you may have a corridor that requires skewed ends. Sometimes you may see this when a corridor meets a bridge, where the abutments are not perpendicular to the roadway. In today's session, we'll explore a workflow to model this skewed geometry. As you can see, I've got a finished example on screen. I am going to flip to another drawing that represents an unfinished example, and we'll start by doing a quick tour. In this drawing, I have an alignment called Main Street. I have a surface called EG for existing ground. I have a pair of polylines that define my skew area. If I back up and pan over, you can see that I have extracted an existing ground surface profile, and I have a finished grade profile for Main Street. If I pan this back, you can see I've defined some assemblies for today. I'm going to zoom in on this one for now. This represents a full roadway section. It's called roadway main. Basically, it's got 2 lanes, 12 feet wide with 2% cross slopes. These are the lane super elevation AOR out-of-the-box lanes that come with Civil 3D. Let's back up. So basically, I have everything I need to create my corridor. To build a corridor, I'm going to open the corridor menu, and I'll choose corridor. And then I will call this corridor Main Street, and then I will select the alignment, profile, and assembly I'd like to use for this corridor. I'm going to click the green block, and I will grab my alignment from screen. One of the things that I like from the newer iterations of Civil 3D is it then displays my profiles right here in the in-canvas menu. I can choose the finished grade profile from here. I could also select it from here if I wanted to. I could then select my assembly. I could do that using the green block, or I could just pick it from this menu. I'll choose roadway main. And then I don't need to see the dialog box, so I will untoggle this, and I will click OK. So I've created my first corridor. My corridor runs the full length of the alignment, and by default, in this template that I'm using, my corridor displays using what I call a plottable style. The geometry that we see is the line work that I'd like to see on my plots. I would like to display some of the assembly insertions and the geometry that make up this corridor, so I'm going to change the style. I will select the corridor and come over to my Properties palette, and then I will come down and change the code set style to one called Autodesk Working. And there you can see the assembly insertions for this corridor. Now, as my corridor passes through this skewed area, the geometry is exactly what I need. If this was a perfect world, I could simply trim this corridor using these 2 edges. Unfortunately, we don't have a perfect world, so I'm going to show you how we can model the skewed geometry. I'm going to do that using a corridor twin. I will make a corridor that is dynamic to this one, and then I will use that corridor to define the targets necessary to model my skews. I am going to start by kind of disabling or hiding this corridor. I will do that by selecting it, and then from the ribbon, I'll choose Corridor Properties. And then in the Parameters tab, I will click this toggle to essentially undraw the corridor. You can see that none of these are selected. If I check this one, it's drawing all the geometry. If I click this one, it's not drawing the geometry. When I click OK and rebuild, you can see the corridor is still there. It's still defined, but it's just not drawing anything on screen. Let's create another corridor. I'm going to go to the Home ribbon tab, and I'll open up the corridor menu again, and I'll choose corridor. I'm going to create a corridor called Main Street Skew. And then I'm going to use the same alignment profile and assembly that we used before. Let's click the block, and I will grab the Main Street alignment, finished grade profile, and then I will use that same full roadway section, roadway main. This time I do want to see the dialog box, so I'll leave that toggled, and I'll click OK. Now, we can see the region for my secondary corridor here. I don't want the secondary corridor to be the entire length of the alignment. No reason to do that. I want this to be a little bit shorter, maybe station 4 plus 50 to maybe station 6 plus 50. We'll just have it in the skewed area. So I will change my start station. I'll just click in here and I'll type 450 and I'll press tab. And then I'll click the end station. We'll make this 650 and I'll press tab to accept that. And then I will click OK and we'll rebuild the corridor and I'll back up. So this looks good. I'm going to select this and I will go over to my prospector. I guess I didn't have to select it. I just come over here and find that corridor. From here, I'm going to right click and say Rebuild Automatic. Now, I'm sure you'll agree this corridor is identical to the first one that I built. And it's built from the same components. If my alignment changes, profile changes, or that typical section changes, both of these corridors are going to update. And this one's going to update automatically. I'm going to select this corridor. We'll put a surface on it. And I'll do that by coming up to the ribbon and I'll choose Corridor Surfaces. I would like to create a surface. We'll call this Main Street Skew Top. And I would like to build this from the top codes. We'll add that as break lines. Overhang correction probably isn't necessary, but I'm practicing good form. I'm saying top links. Let's go to boundaries, and I'll right-click and say use the corridor extents as outer boundary. And then I'll click OK. So now I have a top surface on this corridor. I can use this to build some three-dimensional geometry for the skews. I'd like to do one more thing. I would like to extract some feature lines from this corridor. I'll do that by selecting the corridor, and then from the ribbon, I'll say that I want to extract feature lines from corridor. And if I hover, basically I want to pull the left and right edge of pavement. If I hover over the left edge of pavement, you can see that there's a lot of point codes here. Edge of traveled way base, pave 1, pave 2, and sub. So when I click the left edge of pavement and the right edge of pavement and press enter, you can see there's a whole bunch of options here. I don't need all of these, so let me deselect those. I just want the edge of traveled way on the left side, and I want the edge of traveled way on the right side. Let's click extract. These feature lines are dynamic to this corridor. So if the host corridor changes, this one will change. These feature lines will update. These surfaces will update. All of my targets will update. Now that I have these feature lines, I am going to hide them. We don't need to see them right now. I'm going to select them and go to the Properties palette, and we'll change their style to one that I've created called No Display. And then I don't need to see the corridor. If I hover over the corridor, you can see it's sitting on a layer called Z Corridor Main Street Skew. I've got my template set up so that when I create a corridor, it puts these on an object layer. I will go to my layer list here, and then I will drag down, and we'll find that Z Corridor Main Street Skew. I'm just going to freeze that for right now. And then I don't need to see this surface. We'll keep it here for just a second because I want to generate some profiles through here. So we'll keep it for right now. Let's turn our skew geometry into alignments. I'll generate an alignment from this edge. I'm going to come up to alignments, and I will say create alignment from objects. I will select this object, press enter. I'll accept the direction, press enter. We will call this west edge skew. And I'm going to use existing edge of pavement style for that geometry, just so it looks different, so you can tell that it turned into something else. I don't need labels on this, so I'll say no label set, and I'll say erase the existing entities. And when I click OK, you can see how that visually changed. It's now an alignment, west edge skew. Let's create one here. I'll choose alignments, create alignment from objects. I will select this object and press enter. I'll accept the direction, and we'll call this east edge skew. Keep the same style, no labels, erase the existing entities. Let's click OK. There we go. So I've got a horizontal target now. I would like to create a profile or vertical target through this surface. I will select the alignments, and then from the ribbon, I'll say surface profile. I would like to use this alignment to sample that corridor surface that we made. Let's click add, draw in profile view, create profile view, and I will place this up here. There it is. And then we'll do one for this alignment. I will select this alignment and choose surface profile. I would like to use the east edge alignment to sample that top surface. Let's click add, draw in profile view, create profile view, and I will place this up here. Did I have to create the profile views? No, not necessarily. I just created them so you could see that geometry. We could actually delete the view itself. Let's do that. I'm going to select each view. Now, if you're going to select views and delete them, just click the grid. Don't make a window around everything, or you'll actually delete those profiles. If I delete the grid, that's fine. I can hit delete, those profiles still exist. Okay, now I don't need this surface. We'll select that. I'll go to the Properties palette, and then I will change its style to no display. Let's bring back our original corridor now. From the Prospector tab, I'll find the Main Street corridor, and then I will choose Properties, and then we will redraw this, and I'll click OK. We'll rebuild. There it is. If you remember, this corridor was built using that full lane assembly. So I've got a left lane here that's 12 feet wide, and I've got a right lane that's 12 feet wide. That is perfect until I get right here. Once I get here, this is the last spot where I'm going to have two 12-foot lanes. From here to here, as I pass in this area, I will have a 12-foot lane on the left, but the right lane is going to taper down to nothing. And then from here, as I progress until I get here, I will have no right side lane, and the left lane is going to taper down to nothing. And then the reverse would be true for the other side. Let's create some regions so we can change this corridor. I will select the corridor, and then from the ribbon, I will choose Split Region, and then I will click inside. I've just got one region at this point that runs the full length, and it says, where do you want to split it? I want to split it at Shift-right-click. I will say Apparent Intersection, and I will click here. We use Apparent Intersection because the elevation of these items are different, and that will allow us to select that as though they did physically intersect. I'm still in the command, so I'm going to click in the region on this side, and I will split this one at the apparent intersection here. And then we'll pan down, and I will split this region at the apparent intersection here, and I will split this region at the apparent intersection here. I'll press Enter when I'm finished. Now, I don't need the region in this area, so let's get rid of it. I'll select the corridor, and then from the Modify Region panel, we'll open this up and I'll say Delete Regions. And it says which regions. I'll click inside this one and I'll press Enter. There we go. Let's clean some of this up. Once again, I've got an assembly that's 2 lanes, same assemblies used in this region. I want the lane that's used on this side to target this horizontal edge, this horizontal alignment. So let's adjust the targets in this region here. I will select the corridor and say Edit Targets. I will then click inside this region and press Enter. Now it's showing me the subassembly parts on the assembly in this area that support targeting. Got my left lane and my right lane. My right lane supports both a horizontal target and an elevational target. I'm going to click the horizontal target. When I target something horizontally, I can target an alignment, or I can target a feature line or geometry in my file. I want to target an alignment. I don't need to even know what the name is. I can just click the green block and say, I want you to target this, and I'll press Enter. Let's choose Rebuild the Corridor, and let's click OK. And notice that it looks like it didn't really do what we wanted. That's because through this span, there was really only one assembly insertion, and that insertion, the lane was 0. So let's tighten up the frequency through here. I'm going to do that by selecting the corridor, and then I'll choose Edit Frequency, and I'll click inside this region. And I'm going to tighten this up to maybe 2.5. I'm going to tighten that up in the straight segments and vertical curves. I don't have any arcs or spirals here, so we'll make that 2.5. And then I'm going to click to add a frequency insertion. And you can see the very end of the line here is 15.33. I don't want to have a station where the width is actually 0, so let's just back this up a touch, 15.32. To do that, I'm going to click to add a frequency at that arbitrary point, press Enter, and then we can just type what we want, 15.32. And when I click OK, you can see that looks pretty good. Let's do the same thing over here. Over here, I'm going to do the targeting on the left lane. I will select my corridor, and then from here, I will choose Edit Targets, and I'll click inside this region and press Enter. And then I can see the lanes, or the objects associated with the assembly that support targeting in this area. I've got a left lane and a right lane. The left lane supports a horizontal target. I will click, and I want you to target an alignment. I'll grab the alignment and press Enter. We'll rebuild the corridor and click OK. Just like we saw before, we can edit the frequency now. Let me hit Escape. I'll grab the corridor. We'll go to Edit Frequency, and I'll click inside this region. And I'll bump this down to 2.5. 2.5, and then we will add 1. I can see the end of the line here is 7905. So if we put one at 7906, I think we'll be good. I'll just click at an arbitrary location. So I get 1, and we'll make this 7906. Let's click OK. OK, that looks good. Now let's take care of these portions. The challenge I have here is I've essentially run out of alignment. So how I'm going to drive the corridor in this area is using the edge of pavement. If you remember, I extracted feature lines for the edge of pavement that are dynamic to this corridor. I can run an assembly along that edge of pavement that has a lane on it, and I'll have the lane target this edge, both horizontally and vertically. If I drag up, you can see here's the assembly I'm using. Basically, it's just a copy of this one, copied it up. And I'm going to say I'm going to run the assembly along the edge of pavement using the same lane, and I want this lane to target that edge. I just called it left lane skew. Consequently, I made one for the other side called right lane skew. It's going to work the same way. We'll see that in a minute. Let's turn those feature lines back on. Over here in my prospector, I will go to feature lines, and you can see there's the 2 feature lines there. I'm going to hold my Shift key and select both of those. I'll right click and choose select. And then when they're selected, I'll go to my properties palette and we'll make these, I'll just use grading edge for right now so we can see them on screen. Now let's add this feature line as a baseline to our corridor. I'll do that by selecting the corridor. And then I will choose add baseline from the modify corridor ribbon panel. And I can add a baseline that's an alignment and profile or a feature line. I'm going to choose feature line and then I will click the green block and I will select this feature line. And now I can give it a name. I'm going to call this left EOP, edge of pavement, and I'll click OK. And OK. Now let's add a region to this baseline. I'll come up to the ribbon and choose add regions. And it says, which baseline do you want to add a region to? You got two of them now. I'll click over here to select this one, the one on the left. And then where do you want that to start? I want the region to start at the end point of that last station, and I want it to run to the apparent intersection here. I want to use that left lane skew. Okay, so I'm running the assembly along here, and remember that lane's on this side. Let's click OK. And I could do the targets, but let's not do them just yet. Let me go ahead and click OK so you can see what that looks like. There's that lane doing what it's supposed to. I just need to pull that over to follow this line. Let's adjust the targets. I'm going to click that corridor. We'll go to Edit Targets, and I'll click inside this region and press Enter. I can now see the components there, the left lane that support targeting. For the width target, I am going to target the alignment. And you can see the alignment's called West Edge Skew. I also want to do an elevational target. I will come down to West Edge Skew. That's the profile for that surface. Okay, so it's going to target this horizontally, and it's going to target it vertically. Let's choose Rebuild Corridor, and I'll click OK. Just like we did before, we'll have to clean this up. I will select it, and we'll go to Edit Frequency. I want to edit the frequency in this area. We'll make this 2.5. We'll make this 2.5. And we'll put a frequency here at the end at 71.4, so 71.39. We'll just click in here to get one and press Enter. And we'll make this 71.39. And we'll click OK. The reason I targeted this side horizontally and this side vertically is because of the lane slopes. If you remember, in the region right here, I'm using the full assembly. Eventually, if I'm going to edit this design, I'll edit my lane slopes here. So if I edit the right side lane slope, if I change it to 4%, it'll still be 4% here. I'm just targeting this horizontal. No worries there. But if you remember, I'm using a different assembly in this area. So if I made this lane 4% down, I would have to come back and make sure that I made this one 4% up. To avoid that, to make this as maintenance-free as possible, if you remember, that surface on that twin corridor is based on that full roadway assembly. Whatever I pick for the full roadway assembly, that surface is going to update to that. So that's why I target this both horizontally and vertically. Then I don't have to worry about setting a slope for this. The slope will be taken care of based on the target. I'm going to do the same thing over here. We'll add another baseline to this corridor. I'm going to select the corridor and we'll say Add Baseline, and we will add a feature line. I will select this one, and we'll call this Right Edge of Pavement. Let's click OK, and then I'll click OK. Now we'll create a region for this baseline. We'll say Add Regions, and it says which baseline. You got 3 of them now. I'm going to click this baseline. Where do you want it to start? I want it to start at the apparent intersection here. Where do you want it to go? I want it to go to the end point of this station insertion. And I want to use the right lane skew. If you remember, I have that assembly with the lane that's on the left side, okay, because it's modeling the right lane here. That's why it's called right lane skew. Let's click OK. We won't do the targets just yet. Just want you to see it. Let me click OK. And you can see there's the lane. It's sweeping along here, and that lane's on the left side. Now I want this lane to target this edge, both horizontally and vertically. So we'll adjust the targets. I'll click the corridor, and I will go to Edit Targets. I will click inside this region and press Enter. And then for this right lane object, it's the only one in here that supports targeting, we'll go to Width Target. I would like you to follow the alignment. And I would like you to follow a profile. So we'll go to the elevation target, and I want you to follow the East Edge Main Street Skew top. That's that top surface profile. We'll choose Rebuild Corridor and OK. Looks great. We got to tweak the frequency a little bit. I'll select this and go to Edit Frequency. I'll click inside this region, and we'll make this 2.5. We'll make this 2.5. And then we will put a frequency here down at the end. I can see it's 1 plus 2299. So I'll just click to put an arbitrary one in there, press Enter, and we'll make this 1 plus 23. We'll push it out 100th. And I'll click OK. That looks good. I've got my skew. I am going to hide these feature lines again. We don't need to see these. They are dynamically linked to the corridor. They're nice to have for the targets, but I don't need to see them anymore. Let's go back to No Display. There we go. Let's hide this surface, and then we'll make some changes to this. Let's take the surface. We'll go to Properties, and I will set this to No Display. And then let's right-click on corridors there. We'll say Rebuild All. And then we'll split the screen. We'll do 2 vertical. And then in this view on the right, I will tip this up into a 3D view, and we'll get a better look at that skew. And then in this view, let's change the slope of this lane. I'll click this lane, and we'll make it something significant. We'll make it -10. When I click Enter, you can see how that updated. Let me come over here and do a quick regen to update that surface. We'll take the main street. We'll make this rebuild automatic as well. There we go. Let's take this left lane. We'll change this one as well. We'll make this extreme -20%. See how that pulls down? Let me come over here and do a quick regen to update that surface. As fast as I update my design, it's updating that twin corridor that I made, which is updating my targets, which is updating my skew. As I adjust my profile, as I adjust my assembly, that twin corridor will take care of everything in the background. If I was to adjust my alignment, the only real maintenance thing I would have to do is change the starts and ends of my regions. Okay, let me put this back to a single view, and we'll zoom in. It's important to note that I don't have to stop with just 2 lanes. The techniques that we looked at here would easily apply if this design included additional lanes or a shoulder. So the next time you have a corridor that starts or ends on a skew, try modeling it using a corridor twin. This secondary corridor not only defines the targets necessary to model the skew, it also ensures that future design changes and updates are as maintenance-free as possible.